Hi everyone, welcome back to Talent500 YouTube channel. I'm Kushal, I'm a software engineer and a content creator. In a series to prepare for full stack development interviews with big tech companies, in today's video we are going to talk about Azure and Angular. We'll be discussing some important questions which are very important with respect to interviews. If you haven't check the previous videos, make sure you check the previous video. It's a continuous series. So without further ado, let's get started.
So the agenda for today is we'll be talking about the advanced questions for Azure first, then we'll be moving ahead for Angular questions, and then we'll be talking about what you can expect in the next video for this series. So let's get started with the Azure related questions. So the first question is, if an interview asks you what is profiling in Azure, how you need to answer that question. So profiling is nothing but a procedure to measure the performance analysis of a particular application. Why it is being done? It basically done to guarantee that the application can sustain different type of traffics and can work sufficiently and remain steady in cases of overwhelming traffic. So basically how the particular application will behave at different points at different situation, the measurement of that particular metric is called profiling. Now it can be done via different tools which is provided by the Visual Studio. What it does is it gathers performance information from the application that likewise helps in troubleshooting issues. Visual Studio provides multiple tools to us which gather different type of information which helps in troubleshooting issues which can happen in situations of overwhelming profit. Now while answering this question, one should also mention why profiling can be helpful. Now it can be helpful in deciding longest running strategies inside the applications. It provides the information which strategies are running for which amount of duration. It also helps in measuring the execution time of every strategy in a particular call stack, and also helps in assessing the memory allocation, which particular strategy is consuming how much memory. So this is what profiling is, and this is how you have to answer the question. Moving ahead to our next question, which is what is Windows Azure Scheduler? Now Windows Azure Scheduler is a tool that enables you to invoke activities like HTTP, calling HTTP endpoints, or presenting some messages in the message queue, or a storage queue, which is also kind of message queue only, at a particular duration. With the help of scheduler, just like you might have heard about cron jobs, similarly a scheduler helps you to schedule jobs on demand or basically on routinely basis if you want to do something repeatedly daily, or maybe if you want to assign something for a future date. This is the capability a scheduler provides. It can help you create jobs that can call services both inside as well as outside the Windows Azure ecosystem. So let's move on to our third question. What is the distinction between a public cloud and a private cloud? Although it's a very simple question, but you need to have the clarity what is actually the difference between a public cloud and a private cloud. You can definitely give examples also along with your answer. So public cloud is nothing but it is utilized as service which is available on the internet, can be consumed by the users, while when it comes to private cloud, it is something which is specifically for an organization. It is deployed within the limits or within the boundaries of an organization, like the firewall settings, and it can totally be controlled or checked by the users of that particular organization who are dealing with it. So one is controlled, the other is publicly available. Moving on to our next question. What are the different storage services available in Azure apart from blob storage? So blob storage is a kind of storage that is available at Azure portal, but the interviewer is asking about different storage services available in Azure apart from blob storage. So you need to answer each and every one along with a few features of each and every one. The first is Azure Table Storage. Now it's a type of storage which allows the application to deploy with having semi-structured data and a key value store, which is basically the NoSQL database type. Now where it is consumed where the requirement for application has a flexible data scheme. The data is in terms of entities grouped under tables. It also emphasizes on enterprise level and strongly follows the consistent models. Now second is Azure Queue Storage. It's a message queue based storage service, and it is capable of handling large workloads through development of flexible and durable applications. So basically it creates application in order to handle different types of workloads. It ensures that the application is scalable and less likely to have component failures. It also has a monitoring system which helps application to ensure that requirements are met at each and every point. The third type is Azure File Storage, which allows you to share files and allow access to different files which are shared across server message block protocol. The data is stored with SMB 3.0 and HTTPS. Now, some of the salient feature around this particular storage is it improves performance of on-premise application. What is on-premise application? Application which are restricted within the boundaries of the organization. It also takes care of OS deployments and hardware management. Let's move on to our next question. How will you execute code with the help of Azure if there is no server? Now here, when you don't have a server, Azure functions can help you execute code, and that is what serverless is. These servers, basically you don't have to do anything, you just need to take care of your business logic and use these Azure functions to execute that business logic. These services simplify complex orchestration and challenges. They help connect with different services without hard coding of integration, which speeds up the development process. The developers only need to write the business logic, which allows them to save time and effort and do things very quickly. Since the code is running on Azure functions, it generates metrics, basically analysis how the code is actually performing, as well as also identify hiccups and failure points across various application components. So it not only take a lot of the effort and work from the developer's end, but also provide some extra value basic in terms of performance analysis or monitoring to improve on the go. So these are the questions for the Azure. Now let's move on to our next topic, which is Angular. So the first question for Angular is, what is server-side rendering in Angular? Now, if we talk about in general in a web application, what happens is when you go in the browser to a particular website, how the things loads is the browser executes the application first and then the JavaScript handles all the user interactions. However, sometimes if we have a large application with big bundle size, our pages, like the loading thing, will be slowed down because it takes a bit more to download all the files, parse JavaScript and then execute it. In order to overcome this slowness, what we do is we do server-side rendering. Now what is server-side rendering? It basically allows us to send the fully rendered page from the server to the browser, which can be displayed directly, and then let the JavaScript code to take over for any user interactions later. So this is the simplest way you can explain to the interviewer what is actually server-side rendering. Moving on to our next question, which is, what is an Angular router? So what is routing? First of all, let's discuss that. So routing is nothing but in a single page front-end application, it is a task of responding to different URL components by adding and removing content from the applications. This is a complicated task because as we first need to intercept a request that changes the browser's URL. So we don't wish the browser to reload, but we need to keep responding to the changes that are happening to the URL in the browser. So then we need to determine which content to remove and which content to add based on the changes that happen to the URL, and then accordingly change the URL to show the current page to the user. Now, as it seems, it can be very difficult, especially in multiple application. That is why Angular comes in with a full routing solution for a single page application. In this, we can define routes with matching components and let Angular handle the routing process. Moving ahead to our next question, which is, what is multicasting in Angular? In Angular, when we are using HTTP client module to communicate with backend service and fetch some data, after fetching the data, we can broadcast it to multiple subscribers in one execution. Now this task of responding or sharing the fetched data to multiple subscribers is actually called multicasting. Now it is especially useful when we have multiple parts waiting from the application waiting for our data. How we can implement this? We need to use RxJS subject. We cannot use observables here because observables are unicast and they do not allow multiple subscribers. However, subjects do allow multiple subscribers and hence can be used to implement multicast. Moving on to our next question, which is, what are the different kinds of Angular directives we have? So we have three kinds of Angular directives. One is component, the other is structural, and the third is attribute. So component is basically a directive with a template. It is used to define single pieces of the user interface like CSS styles or TypeScript code or the HTML template. Now when we define a component, we use the component decorated with @ symbol and pass it as object with a selector attribute. Now the selector attribute gives Angular compiler with HTML tag that the component can be associated with. Now, when we consume it in the HTML page, or when it encounters this tag in the HTML, it knows which particular component needs to be replaced with that tag. Now, the second is structural directive. Now, what is structural directive is it is used to change the structure of the view. For example, you want to hide some data based on some property, then you can use nglf directive. Or if you want to add a list data in the markup, then you can use *ng for, and so on. So if you want to update the structure of a view, structural directive is the thing that you can use. And these directives are called structured directives because they can change the structure of the template. The third and the last is attribute directive. Now what does it do is attribute directive change the appearance or the behavior of an element, component, or other directives. They are used as attributes for elements. For example, ng class, ng style are the attributes directive. Moving on to our last question, which is what is the purpose of the common module in Angular? Now in Angular, the common module that is available and in the package at Angular /common is a module that encapsulates all the commonly used features of Angular, such as the services, pipes, directives, etc. It contains some sub-modules as well, like the HTTP client module, which is in the structure of at Angular /common/HTTP package. Now, because of the modular nature of Angular, its functionalities are stored in small self-contained modules, which can be imported and included in any of your projects based on the requirement that you have or based on the functionalities that you need to add in your application. Now this is it. In the next part, you can expect everything in and out about the REST framework. Thank you.
I hope you have enjoyed the video and learned something out of it. Make sure you watch the previous videos as well. It's a continuing series, and wait for the next video as well. It will be on REST framework. Till then, bye bye, take care. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel for more such amazing content.